Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Hearing Protection Act. This is a bill that was introduced to Congress 2 years ago, actually, but for some reason it didn't pass. And now it has been reintroduced by a congressman out of Virginia named Ben Cline. It has a lot of support. There's like 40 co-signers on the bill, but I don't know why it didn't pass the first time. So who knows what's going to happen this time? I'm just really hoping that it passes. But Cliff Notes version of what happens if it passes. Essentially, it becomes significantly easier to buy a suppressor and to make one yourself. So, right now, the process for buying or making a suppressor is you have to get approved for a Form 4 or a Form 1, which means you got to do fingerprints, you got to have your passport photo, you got to pay the $200 tax stamp, then you got to wait to get approved, right? Now, granted, the wait times have come down significantly, but it's still a much longer process than it needs to be. And the fact that suppressors are regulated in the first place is just stupid because they are literally safety equipment. You know, it would be like regulating earplugs. So, anyways, that's the process that you have to go through now. If this passes, you don't have to do any of that. You just walk into a gun store, you do the regular NICS check, which is like the instant background check. You walk out with your suppressor. There's no waiting period, there's no extra forms, there's no tax stamp, right? And honestly, like if this bill passes, this is going to make a massive impact on the suppressor market. I mean, everybody will buy a suppressor. You know what I'm saying? Like right now, the only thing that holds most people back from owning suppressors is just the fact that they're an NFA item and it requires the extra freaking paperwork and the tax stamp to own them, you know? Like some of the cheapest suppressors you can get, like let's say something rated for 5.56. I mean, obviously you can get 22 suppressors for like $250, which is ridiculous. A suppressor for a 22 should be like $50, but real world numbers, you know, a 22 caliber suppressor is like $200, and you know the cheapest 5.56 suppressor you're gonna find is gonna be like $500. You know, add on to that the $200 tax stamp, and now you're spending $700 just to not blow out your ears every time you go shooting. So that by itself keeps a lot of people away. But just the wait times coming down over the last year has significantly increased the amount of people buying suppressors. So once they get rid of the tax stamp altogether, the numbers are gonna go through the roof. Just over the last 5 years, it's either the last 5 years or 10 years. I can't remember. The number of suppressors in circulation has gone from 900,000 to almost 5 million. So people really want suppressors, and even with a tax stamp standing in the way, they're willing to buy them. And like I said, once that tax stamp is gone, you know, there's going to be tens of millions of people buying suppressors. You know, it's if there's already 5 million of them out there, you can guarantee there's going to be significantly more once there's not a $200 barrier to entry. Not only that, see, this bill is just positive for everybody across the board. It's nothing but a good thing. Because if it passes, a ton more manufacturers are going to enter the space. And there's going to be a bunch of competition in the suppressor market. And that's going to drive all the prices down. Because right now, there's too much that stands in the way of being a manufacturer of suppressors. So a lot of companies just don't do it. You know what I mean? A lot of companies don't want to deal with it. There's not nearly as many brands of suppressor out there as there should be. You know, there should be as many brands of suppressor as there are brands of gun. There should be more suppressor companies than there are gun companies. And what, you know, if this bill passes, there probably will be. But like I said, there will be a ton of competition on price, and it'll be good for us, the consumer, because that we'll end up living in a world where you can walk into a gun shop and buy a nice suppressor for like $200 instead of, you know, right now some of these companies want $1,100 for a freaking suppressor. Now I understand, you know, some of it has to do with being made out of exotic materials and, you know, maybe the manufacturing process, like some of these fancy 3D printed metal suppressors, you know. But realistically, genuinely, suppressors should not be that expensive. You know what I'm saying? I don't care what kind of freaking material you're making these things out of. If you're just like, let's say you're just doing like a basic suppressor that's not 3D printed, that's turned on a lathe, that's welded, like you should not be charging $1,100 for a suppressor. But they can get away with that right now because the market is not as saturated as it should be. Once those tax stamps go away, once these suppressors aren't nearly as regulated as they are now, like I said, the competition's going to go nuts. Manufacturers are going to have no choice but to drive the prices down, which means we all get suppressors for much cheaper. But not only that, like, most of the people who are following my channel are following because of the video that I made about the homemade 3D printed suppressors, the ones out of plastic and carbon fiber. And if this bill passes, you can bet your sweet ass I'm going to be squirting freaking cans out of this 3D printer until every single one of my guns has at least a couple suppressors. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to make a ton of them because it's easy and it's cheap and it's fast. You know, metal suppressors are cool for sure. I like metal suppressors, don't get me wrong. But if I can squirt a freaking 3D printed suppressor out of this printer with, you know, $30 worth of parts, because once you, like, the most expensive part of one of these 3D printed suppressors is buying whichever muzzle device that goes with it. Like if you want the Breek, Castle Blast Shield and the Breek muzzle brake that goes with it, that's like $50 right there. But once you own that, you can make as many suppressors out of it as you want. You know, like you can wear one out and then just make another. Well, you can't do that now, right? If right now, because of the tax stamps and the NFA, you'd have to, you know, do a whole nother Form 1 in order to remake your suppressor. But if this bill passes, you don't have to do that anymore. You could just blow through these suppressors as often as you want and then just make them new, which completely changes the dynamics of, like right now, on that video, a lot of people will ask how long the homemade suppressors last, the plastic and carbon fiber ones, because it doesn't make sense to make one of these if you still have to pay the $200 tax stamp and then it's not going to last very long. Now, granted, they do last pretty long, especially depending on which caliber you're using. Like if it's a pistol caliber, they last a long time. But the issue that people have is, okay, but once they do wear out, now I got to get another tax stamp. And then it starts to eat away at the economic benefit of being able to make it yourself. Once the tax stamp is gone, it makes way more sense to just make them yourself versus going out and buying, you know, pre-made suppressors from these various manufacturers, especially if they're going to keep trying to charge these ridiculous prices. You know what I'm saying? Like if a suppressor, you know, even like I said, even a cheap suppressor, like my suppressor from Griffin Armament is really good. It's a stainless steel. I think I want to say it's all stainless steel except for the blast baffles made of something different, but I can't remember. But it's a really good suppressor. I love it. Glad I have it. Hate that I had to pay an extra tax stamp for it. But it was like, even with the military discount that Griffin Armament has, I want to say it was like $550 for the suppressor. For $550, I could make a lot of the freaking 3D printed suppressors. I could make a lot of them. You know what I'm saying? So if I don't have to make a tax stamp, if I don't have to buy a tax stamp and get approved for a Form 1 anymore, makes a big old difference in the decision-making process of, hey, do I want a metal suppressor or do I want a homemade suppressor? So, like I said, it just if this bill passes, it's going to change a lot of things, and it's going to change them drastically. I mean, one, it's going to make shooting more comfortable for everybody because when you go to the range, way more people are going to have suppressors. Right now, when I go to the range, I'm always the only person who has a suppressor. I can't even, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever, any of the times that I've been to my local range, I don't think I've ever heard anyone else using a suppressor, which is crazy because shooting suppressed is way better than shooting unsuppressed. It's so much more comfortable, especially because the range I go to is an indoor range. Shooting unsuppressed in an indoor range sucks, okay? But once, you know, if there weren't tax stamps, if suppressors were cheaper, I can guarantee I'd be seeing a lot more people at the range using suppressors, which means it would be more comfortable to go shoot. You know, like, it's just better. Shooting with suppressors is just better, objectively. There is literally, like, sure, you gotta, you know, make sure the gun is tuned up for it or whatever. Like, you can't necessarily just throw a suppressor on everything, but it is better. Like, there is No world where shooting unsuppressed is superior to shooting suppressed. You know what I mean? Like, there's nobody out there who's thinking like, yeah, I wish my gun was even louder. You know what I mean? Like, everybody wants suppressors. It's just that there's all these dumb rules that get in the way. So I'm hoping, I'm praying that this gets passed. I don't even know when it would come into effect if it gets passed. I don't even know when they're going to vote on it. Like I said, it was in Congress 2 years ago and it didn't pass. So who knows? But maybe this time around everybody will do what they should have done 2 years ago. I don't think I don't want to make this video too long. There was another big channel that was talking about suppressors, or talking about the Hearing Protection Act, and the guy was very confused about what he had read, because in the act it talks about defining what a suppressor is, and it defines like the body, the tube of a suppressor as a suppressor. And he thought that somehow this was going to make Form 1s impossible, and he thought that Maglite tubes are going to suddenly become illegal, and any tube that you have, they could call it a suppressor, and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't make any, his concerns didn't make any sense, because once this bill passes, there is no more Form 1. Like, in the same way that I can manufacture my own firearm at home without doing any paperwork, once this bill passes, I can make suppressors without doing any paperwork. There is no Form 1 anymore. There is no Form 4. And the Form 1s that existed, those get deleted. The Form 4s that existed, those get deleted. Like right now, if I want to print a lower, I can print that lower. I don't have to do any paperwork for it. The only time you have to do paperwork is when you're dealing with NFA items. So, like I said, he was confused. He thought that it was going to somehow change our ability to make these things ourselves, but he was completely wrong. It gets rid of all of that. It makes it way easier. You know, like I said, you go to the ATF's website right now. There's a whole page. It says, can I build my own firearm? Can I make my own firearm at home? Yes. Like the ATF themselves it just openly admits and says in plain English, you can make your own firearm. The only time you need to do any type of special anything is if you're doing some sort of NFA, like short-barreled rifle, or, you know, sawed-off freaking shotgun, or, you know, explosive devices and stuff like that. So, sidetrack. Like I said, that guy was confused. If you hear anybody talking about this bill, just understand it doesn't negatively impact Form 1s. It removes Form 1s from the equation entirely. And any form, like I have 2 Form 1s for the cans that I've made so far, and I've got a Form 4 for the can that I bought. Those get deleted. Those mean nothing if this bill passes, right? So, like I said, it's just a good thing across the board if this passes, and I really hope that it does. And yeah, like I said, I don't want this video to be too long, because there's not that much to cover. This bill actually isn't that long. If you just want to go read the whole thing, just Google Hearing Protection Act. If you notice the background looks a little different, that's because I got a new big old rack from Lowe's so that I could reorganize my office. And you guys can't see, but my office is significantly more organized and tidy than it was the last time I recorded. I'm also doing something different with the cam. And like normally I record from the camera to a capture card straight into OBS, and then I edit everything in Adobe Premiere on my computer. But I have this M4 iPad Pro, with the ones that came out last year. I bought it because, like, I for anybody who doesn't know, I own a screen printing business. I do, you know, t-shirts. This is a DTF print that comes out of this DTF printer, direct to film. But I also do like screen printing, like, you know, with the squeegees and the screens. I do that out in the garage. But I have an iPad because part of my job, I have to do a lot of graphic design for people. And this particular iPad is like super powerful, and I've never really used it to like any of its actual potential. So like I said, I'm doing this video different. If it looks different, I don't know if it's going to look any different, but essentially, instead of recording straight onto my computer, I'm just going to record onto the card, and then I'm going to import everything into my iPad. I keep pointing over here because this is where the iPad is, but I'm going to take everything straight off the card, go to and put it onto the iPad, and I'm going to edit everything on the iPad in Final Cut Pro. I mean, I have like a really high-end computer. It's not like I need to do it on the iPad. I'm just doing this out of curiosity. At some point, I'm going to be making a review video of this iPad, just talking about it from like a business owner slash creator's standpoint. And so this is one of the things that I need to do for that video in order to really evaluate how well it does. Like, I've used my computer up to this point. I know how long it takes to render the videos on the computer. I'm genuinely curious to see if there's going to be a difference in speed, rendering videos in Final Cut Pro on the iPad versus rendering them in Adobe Premiere on my computer. I have no idea, but I will find out. So if the video looks any different, whether it's better or worse, I have no idea. But if it does look any different, that's part of the reason why. Not just, well, obviously the background's different for this particular video because, like I said, I got that new stuff back there. But it might also look different just because it'll be edited in a different, program. And I don't know if I render them on my computer. I don't know if I've been rendering them in HDR. I know I render them in 4K, obviously, but I know the camera does HDR. The iPad has native HDR support. And I know Final Cut Pro renders in HDR, So I don't know. Maybe it'll look better. Maybe it'll look worse. I have no idea. But anyways, that's another sidetrack. That video on the iPad will be coming at some point. This video I just wanted to get out because this is like, it's a big thing that people are talking about right now because it's exciting news, and hopefully that bill passes. The next video will probably... Actually, I don't know what the next video will be. But anyways, if you like the video, feel free to like and subscribe. The channel's growing a lot. It's kind of crazy. Like, just a couple of weeks ago, there's a community post that I made thanking everybody because I had finally made it to 300 subscribers. And that was literally like, I want to say 2 weeks ago. And now I'm sitting at like 1,600 subscribers or something like that. I'm in the YouTube Partner Program now, so channel's growing fast. And so thank you guys for that. I really appreciate everybody who has subscribed, and hopefully I can keep delivering content that is worthy of your subscription. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.